Good evening, America. My name is Joseph Enders. In 2021, I did a deep dive into the fraud and illegality that took place in the 2020 presidential election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. With recent investigations ongoing into what happened in Fulton County, Georgia, I thought it was time for me to release everything I have in the hopes of helping this investigation, in the hope of eliminating fraud in American elections for good. So I will be releasing this 2021 documentary again, and I want everybody to watch it and everybody to know exactly what I found and exactly what happened in 2020.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Complicated business. Complicated.
Before 2020, there were metrics that almost always predicted the winner. And all three of these bulletproof predictors pointed to a Trump win again in 2020. The first and most well-known predictor is the Reagan metric.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? No president up for re-election who scores higher than 40% has ever lost. In 1984, 44% said they were better off under Ronald Reagan and re-elected him. In 1992, 38% said they were better off under George Bush Sr. and he lost. In 2004, 47% were better off under George Bush Jr. He won. In 2012, 45% were better under Barack Obama. He won too. In 2020, a colossal 56%, the highest on record, said they were better off under Trump, and yet Trump lost. Donald Trump actually performed better in this metric than President Reagan, who introduced the metric. The next predictor, voter enthusiasm, predicted every election, except of course 2020. The week before the election, a national CNN poll measuring voter enthusiasm showed Trump's at 79% against just 66% for Biden. In battleground states, the same scenario. In Ohio, 61% of Trump voters were enthusiastic about voting for Trump, compared to only 56% for Biden. Trump won by 8 points, an accurate prediction. In Florida, Trump voters' enthusiasm registered at 68%, Biden's 63%. Trump carried Florida by over 3 points, correct, again. But in Michigan, 64% of Trump voters were enthusiastic, with only 62% for Biden. Somehow, in this Democratic state, the entire metric got flipped. Biden supposedly won by roughly 3 points. The worst prediction was Arizona, where Trump voters had a gigantic 72% enthusiasm in the state. Joe Biden sat at 63%. Yet Biden again mysteriously emerged victorious by half a percentage point. The third predictor, voters responding to the question, is the country headed in the right direction? 38% of voters thought so in 2012 and re-elected Barack Obama. In 2004, 36% were confident and re-elected George W. Bush. In 1996, with confidence in the mid-30s, Bill Clinton was also re-elected. Yet in 2020, Trump matched Obama's 38%. Yet he lost. Once again, a historically reliable predictor simply blew up. Besides those three predictors, voting patterns are also reliable predictors. Certain states, as well as counties, are regarded as bellwethers with a nearly perfect track record. But in 2020, they were more wrong than ever before. The winner of Ohio has become the eventual winner in every election for over 100 years, dating back to 1904, with only 2 exceptions. Once in 1944 during World War II, when FDR lost Ohio by just 12,000 votes out of 3 million. And again in 1960, when Richard Nixon wiped out John F. Kennedy by 6 points. More on the 1960 election a little later. Ohio has been correct 27 out of 29 times. That's 93% accurate. But somehow in 2020, when Trump won the state by 8 points, he still lost the White House. Florida has predicted the winner all but once since 1928. The only mistake being that same 1960 election of Kennedy. That's 22 out of 23 elections. 95% accuracy. Trump won Florida by 3 points. Yet another bellwether, dead wrong. Combinations of states sometimes act as bellwethers. For instance, Florida and Iowa. This two-state combo has successfully predicted 15 of the past 16 elections. And as with the others, Trump won solidly. There is also a tri-state combo with near bulletproof accuracy: Florida, Ohio, and Iowa. Trump won all three, yet still lost. Turning to certain counties, a cluster of 17 have consistently predicted the winner with 88% accuracy, even getting the 1960 election correct. In that notorious election, the counties were 53% accurate, their worst prediction on record until 2020, where the predictive value of the bellwether counties evaporated to a mere 18% accuracy, by far their worst performance on record. For decades, pre-election polling has traditionally been highly accurate, until 2016, when Trump's victory revealed huge flaws in polling methodology, flaws industry experts promised would be fixed. But in 2020, the polls actually performed worse. Why?
So I've called on the American Association of Public Opinion Research.
Jim Lee, president of Susquehanna Polling and Research, was one of the few pollsters in the industry to call 2016 correctly. Lee called out ABC News and the Washington Post for producing a poll showing Joe Biden ahead with a 17-point lead in Wisconsin, 10 days before Election Day.
Which was completely laughable, because on its face, there was no historical trend line that would support that kind of a lopsided victory for either candidate.
Susquehanna's polling showed a statistical tie. Several polls in several battleground states missed the mark in the weeks leading up to November 3rd, outside the margin of error. Monmouth University showed Biden leading 7 points in Pennsylvania. Reuters had Biden up 6 points. NBC Marist had him up by 5 points. However, Susquehanna had the race at a statistical tie. Biden was declared the winner by barely 1 point. In Florida, Biden was up 6 points according to Emerson College and 5 points according to Quinnipiac University. Susquehanna, however, also had Florida at a statistical tie. Trump beat Biden there by over 3 points. Lee calls these surveys suppression polls, a form of election interference.
If you see a poll that comes out showing one candidate up by 17 points, why bother showing up at all?
Were these being produced on purpose to hurt Trump, as Trump alleged? Lee didn't say, though he did admit academic pollsters cared nothing about accuracy in 2020.
It's been reported to me that a lot of these polling firms connected to universities, they care more about the branding and the publicity their polls get because it helps them attract students. But these pollsters that run these academic polling institutions, like Monmouth University, Quinnipiac, Franklin and Marshall, these are firms, by the way, that were profiled in an episode of CBS's Inside Edition after the 2020 election as examples of firms that did a bad job in 2020. Their pollsters, they get to keep their jobs. They're tenured professors. Life goes on for them, even if their polls are off by 5 or 10 points.
Major errors in methodology helped Democrats in 2016, and pollsters repeated them in 2020.
It's very obvious to me that some of the polling institutions doing bad work in 2016 continued to do it in 2020 and had a real knowledge, I think, that they knew they were going to be wrong and probably just didn't care.
One error was polling registered voters instead of likely voters, giving Democrats an unfair edge.
In a state like Pennsylvania, Democrats have almost a 10-point advantage in raw registration numbers. But on election day, it's almost dead even between Republicans and Democrats, the polls.
Fudging polls didn't just begin in 2016. Evidence shows Democrats skewed poll results in 2008. Emails reveal Hillary Clinton's campaign colluded with left-wing groups to tip polls in her favor. The email was sent to Andy Meyer, research director at the Atlas Project, a leftist political research and data firm. The operative wrote, "Hey, when can we meet? I also want to get your Atlas folks to recommend oversamples for our polling before we start in February. I want to get this all compiled into one set of recommendations so we can maximize what we get out of our media polling." An Atlas employee provided a 37-page report on how to rig the polls. The report recommended deliberately oversampling Hispanic and Native American populations in Arizona, also suggesting oversamplings of independents in Democratic strongholds. Republican voters are suspicious that pollsters and political operatives are masquerading as objective professionals, much like journalists.
We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
How did Biden defy so many historically reliable predictors? Simple. Election officials broke the law in key swing states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona, instituting mass mail-in ballots, unmanned ballot dropboxes, and artificially lengthened deadlines, and more. The state of Texas noticed this and filed a federal lawsuit against the states responsible, arguing the election was unconstitutional. On December 7th, Texas sued Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Pennsylvania for violating the Electors Clause found in Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution. The suit was supported by 18 state governments and 106 members of Congress. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton petitioned the Supreme Court to answer, did the defendant states violate the Electors Clause by taking non-legislative actions to change the election rules that would govern the appointment of presidential electors? Texas argued the constitutional violations affected the outcome, but as various courts did, the High Court refused to consider the actual evidence, instead opting to throw the case out because of a lack of standing, meaning justices didn't recognize Texas's ability to sue. Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas dissented, saying, "We do not have the discretion to deny the filing of a bill of complaint in a case that falls within our original jurisdiction." Original jurisdiction is the right of a court to hear a case directly. This case presented a state suing others for a direct violation of the Constitution. But if the president and the states combined lack the standing to sue over illegal acts in an election, then who or what does? The Supreme Court was the only court that could have decided the merits of this case. It didn't, leaving it to ordinary Americans to take up the mantle. In each state, evidence was found proving the law was broken, and ballots were submitted illegally, disproportionately to Joe Biden's benefit. The worst offender is the Peach State, Georgia, with its 16 electoral votes. The race was turned on a razor-thin 12,500 votes. Without legislative approval, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger circumvented state statutes that require election officials to verify signatures on absentee ballots. The Texas lawsuit noted, Georgia law authorizes and requires a single registrar or clerk, after reviewing the outer envelope, to reject an absentee ballot if the voter failed to sign the required oath. In March 2020, Raffensperger made an agreement with Stacey Abrams and Georgia's Democratic Party to change the verification process, making it much more difficult to reject an absentee ballot. The plan worked. The absentee rejection rate fell from nearly 6.5% in 2016 to just 0.37% in 2020. Biden had almost double the absentee votes as Trump, 65% compared to only 35%. If the rejection rate remained the same in 2020 as in 2016, there'd be 83,000 fewer ballots cast, decreasing Biden's share by 54,000 and Trump's by roughly 29,000. Trump would have had a net gain of 25,000 votes, over double the 12,500 votes needed to win. This diminishes Biden's Electoral College lead to 290 versus Trump's 248. Video evidence also surfaced of alleged voter fraud on election night. Remember when the counting stopped in the dead of the night around 11 p.m. when Trump was leading in Georgia?
You know, it's a 250,000 vote lead.
Right.
Now, Georgia didn't get extensions. You know, and here's the question that, you know, you think all of these states had all of these ballots sitting there. Many of them started counting them a day or 2, 3 days ago. They had them all ready, and now we get to sort of the witching hour in the very states that everybody was talking about, and all of a sudden everything comes grinding to a halt.
Right.
Around the same time, this happened in Fulton County.
At the center of the controversy is this surveillance video from inside State Farm Arena. Attorney Rudy Giuliani and his legal team say it shows people taking at least 4 boxes of ballots from underneath a table after hours and then counting them with no election supervisors present.
Georgia officials claim everything was legal, but Fulton County Elections Director Richard Barron said this when asked about poll observers being present.
No, but I know also that there were no observers there at the time either. There was only media there.
6 a.m. November 3rd, absentee counts were also delayed because a pipe had burst? This claim was false. Turns out a single bathroom urinal overflowed at State Farm Arena, leaving the janitors with a small puddle.
The most exceptional republic.
Lawmakers and Trump called for an audit with signature verification. Raffensperger said no. Pennsylvania also had legal violations. The Commonwealth has 20 electoral votes, more than any other state accused of fraud. Tallies show roughly 3.3 million votes for Trump and 3.4 million votes for Biden, who reportedly won by about 81,000 votes.
I disagree with everything that they say in their release.
Pennsylvania Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar, a Democrat, ignored state law, loosening signature verification requirements despite the election code, stating that all applications for absentee votes must be signed. Pennsylvania also extended mail-in voting deadlines. Come September 2020, Pennsylvania Supreme Court extended the legislature's deadline to 3 days after Election Day to reduce voter disenfranchisement. Local newspapers hinted at an ulterior motive, noting the judicial body had moved left since losing its conservative majority in 2015. The court also told officials to presume ballots without a postmark were submitted on time and to count them. The Texas lawsuit states, Pennsylvania did not segregate all ballots received after 8 p.m. on November 3rd, 2020.
It's a pleasure for me to be here.
U.S. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito ordered the ballot segregation on November 6th, acting as the state's most powerful federal judicial authority. Boockvar claimed roughly 10,000 ballots came in after the deadline. Her source? Herself. She disobeyed the order to segregate the ballots, so we will never know the truth. State legislator Frances Ryan released the Ryan Report, dissecting Boockvar's claims. Turns out her numbers were off, to put it mildly. Mail-in ballots require a mailed date, which tells election officials when the ballot was sent, and the Ryan Report found major anomalies. Over 9,000 votes had no mailed date. About 58,000 votes returned on or before the mailed date, and roughly 51,000 returned 1 day after the mailed date. That's nearly 120,000 votes. That's 120,000 absentee ballots cast without following legal protocol. 76% of absentee votes were cast for Biden, 23% for Trump. But since these are highly questionable, if they were to be removed from the overall count, Biden loses about 90,000 votes. Trump only loses 27,000. This diminishes Biden's lead from 81,000 votes to 17,000 votes. The Ryan Report outlines a count discrepancy that may be related to this anomaly. It shows Pennsylvania's own data reports failing to account for over 400,000 ballots. November 4th voter files from the state show 3.1 million mail-in ballots sent out. But on November 2nd, information was provided that only 2.7 million ballots had been sent out. If even 1/20th of those 400,000 mail-in votes were cast because of illegal state actions, Trump would have won Pennsylvania by roughly 2,000 votes. This would have given Trump another 36 electoral votes, docking Biden 36. So, without fraud, it's Trump 268, Biden 270. Turning to Wisconsin, worth 10 electoral votes, the margin was a mere 20,000 votes. Wisconsin set itself apart because even elections officials admitted fraud probably occurred.
I've been studying vote fraud for a long time, voter fraud. My major paper in high school was the alleged Chicago vote frauds of 1960, where Nixon lost the state by 9,000 votes, and there is no question of massive vote fraud in the city of Chicago by Mayor Richard Daley.
Remember the 1960 election between Nixon and Kennedy was the only other election where the bellwether states and counties were least accurate?
And I can tell you there is vote fraud. For the Democrats to say that there's no vote fraud in the United States of America, anywhere, anytime, and so forth, and this has been the position that they pressed prior to the election and after the election. I mean, you know, with every single human pursuit that consists of lying, cheating, and stealing.
In 2016, roughly 150,000 mail-in ballots were cast. In 2020, it grew to nearly 1.3 million, a 900% increase. Wisconsin's election laws are atypical. In the Badger State, a copy of a photo ID is required to vote absentee. Wisconsin also has a status called indefinitely confined, an exception for voters who cannot leave their home owing to age, physical illness or infirmity, and those who are disabled for an indefinite period.
No security protocol set up.
In March 2020, Dane County Clerk Scott McDonnell emailed municipal clerks, claiming voters could declare indefinite confinement owing to the governor's China virus lockdown. His advice was promoted in Democratic strongholds like Madison and Milwaukee. These remarks caused a 200% increase in indefinite confinement claims, rising from 57,000 in 2016 to nearly 250,000 in 2020. Wisconsin Supreme Court ordered him to rescind this advice. He did, but it was too late. Around 216,000 votes were cast by the allegedly indefinitely confined. Many were busted posting pictures of themselves at jazz clubs and other public spaces.
You're saying that the signature is not necessary.
The Wisconsin Elections Commission also unconstitutionally modified Wisconsin's election laws by encouraging unmanned ballot drop boxes. Democrat mayors in Green Bay, Kenosha, Madison, Milwaukee, and Racine all rushed in to use them. Roughly 500 unmanned ballot drop boxes were implemented in 2020, despite their being prohibited under Wisconsin law. The election code states, quote, "Any alternate absentee ballot site shall be staffed by the municipal clerk or the executive director of the Board of Election Commissioners, or employees of the clerk or the Board of Election Commissioners." Unknown thousands of votes were tossed in these drop boxes with no investigation of their findings.
The claims are substantive, they are substantial.
At the state level, Attorney Jim Troupis brought the Trump campaign's case to Wisconsin's Supreme Court, making the same allegations. The case was thrown out on latches before a single argument was heard. Latches is when a court refuses to hear a case because it wasn't filed in a timely manner due to some form of unreasonable delay. But Troupis nearly convinced the court to hear the case, even winning over the court's Chief Justice, Patience Rogensack. She writes, "4 justices on this court cannot be bothered with addressing what the statutes require to assure that absentee ballots are lawfully cast. I respectfully dissent from that decision." Liberal Justice Jill Karofsky tried shutting down the case several times. Her interruptions were so frequent, Chief Justice Rogensack needed to step in just to shut her up.
We are an absentee voting state.
Mr. Troupis,
Would he just answer the question?
Had the number of indefinitely confined voters remained unchanged in 2020, up to 150,000 fewer votes would have been cast. This would especially hurt turnout in cities where absentee vote totals hovered around 70 and 90% for Democrats. Had the illegal votes been rejected, Biden would have lost anywhere between 105 and 120,000 votes. Trump would have only lost between 30,000 and 45,000 votes. Even in the worst case scenario, where Biden lost only 105,000 votes and Trump lost 45,000 votes, Trump would still end with a net gain of roughly 40,000 votes, double those required to win. Had Trump secured Wisconsin's 10 electoral votes as well, Trump would have been president with 278 electoral votes, and Biden losing with 260. It only takes 270 to win. But mail-in mischief also influenced Michigan and its 16 electoral votes. Trump received roughly 2.6 million votes, Biden 2.8 million votes, allegedly winning by about 150,000 votes. The extent of voting illegality in Michigan, resulting in potential Trump victory, may never be known. Democrat leaders made investigation impossible.
To misinform the public about the truth behind our elections.
Michigan's Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, a Democrat, ignored several state laws designed to ensure election integrity. But Michigan's election code states county clerks hold the authority to send mail-in applications, not the Secretary of State's office. State law also requires absentee applicants to sign ballot applications, but Benson opened online absentee requests which required no signature. Wayne County, home of Detroit, didn't care. It ignored the rules and counted the mail-in ballots whether they had a signature or not. In December, Election Department whistleblower and longtime city employee Jesse Jacob confirmed this claim in sworn testimony to Michigan's House of Representatives.
Did you look at any of the signatures?
Yes. And I showed that to Mr. Chris Thomas, and he said, let it go. It was totally different. Let it go.
And after that, I was kicked out. I was told not to validate any more ballots.
Poll observers were also blocked from viewing ballot counts under the guise of social distancing, forcing them to observe ballots using binoculars. The Texas case alleges this occurred because election workers were running the same ballots through a tabulator multiple times, as testified to Michigan lawmakers by Melissa Carone, who was working in the tabulation center in downtown Detroit.
There was batches of ballots being ran through the tabulating machines numerous times, being counted 8 to 10 times. I watched this with my own eyes. I was there to assist with IT.
Roughly 62% of all absentee votes in Michigan went to Biden. Only 29% went to Trump. Removing illegally cast mail-ins in Wayne County, Biden loses 107,000 votes. Trump would only lose 52,000, shrinking Biden's lead to 96,000 votes. Pair that with the untold number of illegal votes that came in because of Benson's unconstitutional acts, it's an unknown who really won Michigan. The last state is Arizona, and its electoral votes bear special scrutiny. Maricopa County, home to the state's largest city of Phoenix, was the only county to undergo a full forensic audit. Biden garnered 1.672 million votes in Arizona, with Trump trailing just a hair behind with 1.661 million votes, a difference of about 10,000 votes. The probability of this occurring is just under 3%. There was a 97% chance of a Trump victory in Arizona. Two data analysis firms, Cyber Ninjas and Echo Mail, analyzed Maricopa County's election. Of the proven bad ballots, Trump lost 261 votes and Biden won 99 votes. They also discovered several strange anomalies. Dr. Shiva Ayadurai revealed an abnormally small amount of early voting ballots being rejected for bad signatures.
Maricopa reported only 587 bad signatures. To give you some idea, that's 0.031%. And for people who didn't really like math, I thought I'd make it a little more pictorial. So this would be one bad signature for every 3,268 early voting ballot envelopes. So if you think about 1,918,463 early voting ballots, the unique ones that Maricopa said they got, and for each paper, by the way, the size of the paper is 0.1 millimeter, and you were to put them up, you would get 630 feet. That's the size, believe it or not, of the St. Louis Arch.
Shiva found nearly 5 times that number, roughly 2,500 bad signatures. He continued, comparing this to the signature rejection rate in 2016.
If we go look back at the state of Arizona 2016 general election, out of the 2 million ballots that came in, they had a signature mismatch rate of 0.13%, close to what we would have had if we just included those scribbles.
Now, Cyber Ninjas found Maricopa County had 23,000 mail-in ballots from people who voted from their prior address, despite living outside of Maricopa County. Roughly 10,000 who voted in multiple counties with the same first, middle, last name, and birth year, and 9,000 who returned more ballots than they received. There are certainly explanations for some of these anomalies. Not all are guaranteed to be fraudulent. Regardless, Cyber Ninjas found 55,000 potentially illegal ballots. Arizona's Attorney General is asking for them to turn over their findings for further investigation. If only 1/5 of these votes turned out to be illegal, the results are contested, as it shows the mail-in scandal did indeed affect the final results of the election. There is growing conviction among American voters that elections are rigged. 56% of likely U.S. voters believe cheating tainted Biden's 2020 victory. Accepting this reality is the first step to resolving it. Fix it. Don't call those exposing it nutcases or conspiracy theorists. There is evidence that cheating propelled Joe Biden into office, and the courts and media refusing to consider the evidence doesn't make that evidence disappear. I'm Joseph Enders, Detroit.